Welcome to This Explainer. Okay, today we are unpacking something that's going to feel incredibly validating for a lot of you out there. We're diving deep into the psychology behind why some of us, literally, physically reject being told what to do. If you've ever felt like a simple instruction suddenly wrecked your entire motivation to do a task, well, you are definitely in the right place. Today, we're going to completely decode the rule breaker's brain. Seriously? I want you to ask yourself, do you actually feel a physical tingle of discomfort when someone just gives you an order? Like, have you ever noticed that you can be perfectly happy doing something? Heck, you might even be halfway through doing it, but the absolute second someone tells you that you have to do it, your brain just flips a switch? Suddenly you want to do the exact opposite, even if the rule itself makes total sense. It feels irrational, and people have probably called you difficult or uncooperative. But psychology suggests you aren't actually trying to be a problem at all. Here is our roadmap for this explainer. We'll start with the sense of threat, then compare internal versus external motivation. From there, we'll talk about making obedience a conscious choice, adapting rules to actually work for you, and finally, using critical thinking. Let's jump right in. Starting off with Section 1, the sense of threat, and why control feels like a loss of self. You see, for a lot of folks, rules represent safety and order. They're comforting. But for you, your brain perceives external control not as helpful guidance, but as a direct attack on your identity. There's a clinical term for this, the lens of replaceability. Your identity is built on being this independent, self-determined person. So when a rigid rule gets imposed on you, it creates this heavy, uncomfortable feeling that adhering blindly just makes you another cog in a machine. Following the rule blindly feels like you're literally abandoning your own internal standards just to fall in line. And honestly, this psychological allergy to orders pops up in some pretty hilarious ways. If you've ever stared down a no walking sign at an entirely empty crosswalk and playfully rebelled by jaywalking or crossing it backwards just to avoid doing exactly what the sign demanded, well, you aren't a criminal. You're just allergic to being told what to do. It's a reflex to prove to yourself that you still have agency. Moving on to Section 2, internal versus external motivation, and exactly why simple rules feel so heavy. It all really comes down to what drives you to take action in the first place. Most people rely on external drivers. They prefer generalizations, oversimplification, and when they're handed a task, they just ask how to do it. But you're running on internal drivers. You absolutely thrive on nuance. You require context, and you fundamentally need to ask why. You don't actually resist structure itself. You just resist imposed structure. Because you naturally see the exceptions and the flaws in rigid systems, a one-size-fits-all rule feels intellectually insulting to you. So let me ask you directly, do you question the why way before the how? When a task lands on your desk, is your very first thought, how do I do this? Or is it, wait, why are we even doing it this way? If you need to know the why to function, it just proves your brain is wired for autonomy, not for blind obedience. And the data totally backs this up. A startling 50% of people who prioritize choice over the actual outcome are more likely to experience identity threat when faced with rigid workplace policies. Half! Think about what that means. It means you would literally rather fail on your own terms than succeed by just blindly playing someone else's script. It's a fierce commitment to your own agency, which brings us to how we actually solve this friction. That brings us to Section 3, obedience as conscious choice. This is where we move from rebellion to actual mastery. Okay, so here are some highly concrete strategies to handle this, because how do you navigate a world full of corporate policies without losing your personal autonomy? You have to transform obedience into a conscious choice. Here's exactly how you do that. Step 1. Find the internal logic. Instead of seeing a rule as a command from a boss, hunt for the underlying reason it exists. Step 2. Align the rule with your personal standards. Make it make sense for you. Step 3. Act on your newly framed choice. If you can align the rule with your own values, it completely stops being their rule and becomes your choice. You're not obeying anymore, you're agreeing. That is how you turn forced obedience into a deliberate choice. Let's hit Section 4, adapting rules to work and valuing your unique process. Since you care so deeply about how you do something, you have to protect your workflow. Here are some real-world examples of adapting rigid rules to fit your style. First, focus on the spirit of the rule, not the strict letter of it. For example, say there's a daily check-in meeting that feels super micromanaging. The underlying spirit of that rule is just communication, right? So maintain your unique operational process by adapting it. Maybe you send a highly detailed, proactive email on your own time at the end of the day instead. You satisfy the boss's end goal for communication, but you skip the disruptive meeting. Boom, autonomy protected. And lastly, tolerate uncertainty without relying on strict guardrails. Use your natural comfort with the gray areas to operate creatively where others might just freeze up.
Which leads us to Section 5, using critical thinking to harness your nuance.
This is where you take your natural knack for spotting flaws and use it as an absolute superpower to improve processes. Look, we all start out in blind rebellion, breaking rules just out of spite, which creates a ton of friction and focuses entirely on frustration. But the evolution is system mastery. Instead of just rebelling, you use your capacity for critical analysis to explain the missing context to others. Because you see the details everyone else misses, you can actually upgrade broken processes. You take all that friction and turn it into a systemic improvement. You aren't just a rule breaker, you become an architect of better system. As we wrap up this explainer, I really want you to internalize this. Awareness is the ultimate freedom. The tension you feel isn't bad behavior. Once you recognize that your resistance to rules is just a sign of a fiercely independent mind, the frustration really starts to fade. You aren't being difficult, you're just protective of your autonomy. Every time you choose to act based on your internal values, rather than just reacting blindly against a rule, you're strengthening your mind for true freedom. The ultimate takeaway from the source material today is this incredible thought: fail on your own terms. When you stop seeing yourself as a rebel and start acting like a self-determined thinker, you gain the power to navigate the world completely on your own terms. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer. The next time you face a rigid rule, just ask yourself, are you going to blindly rebel, or are you going to master the system?